What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing back at you again. Today's topic: the delusional myth of Errol Spence being a pay-per-view star is just another foolish Ldbc narrative. Let's chop it up and see what it's all about.
Got the money for minutes, pretty bitch, gotta show me titties. This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? That life before riches, huh? That life before riches, huh? Pretty bitch, show me titties, huh? And I got the glaze, you run up on me, I'ma make you get it. I'ma make you get it.
Okay, boxing fan, let's talk some boxing today. So, we're gonna talk about this whole Errol Spence is a pay-per-view star narrative that we see being pushed by a lot of these Ldbc channels like Phantom Boxing, Blue Blood Sports, and the rest of them. Okay, so I mean, I'm sure if you have watched any of these Ldbc guys, there's many of them out there, not just Phantom Boxing and Blue Blood Sports, but you have a lot more out there. Okay, but you know who they are. So if you have watched any of these channels, you've heard the talk of Errol Spence, being a so-called cash cow or pay-per-view star, especially when compared to Terence Crawford. So one of the narratives that's been run that they've been running is the fact that Errol Spence is a pay-per-view star, and so he should get the lion's share of the cut in terms of the fight between him and Terence Crawford. And as you know, recently Terence Crawford has said that he's no longer he will no longer be asking for that fight because he's basically fed up with all the back and forth, and the fact that Errol Spence is talking about he wants 60-40, 70-30, or whatever he decides to give Terence Crawford. So basically Terence Crawford is, as you all know, has been trying to get this fight with Errol Spence, for the past 3 years, and Errol Spence has been basically avoiding the fight. So it is what it is. Now we're gonna talk about this whole pay-per-view star business, if this is myth or reality, and my contention is that it's basically myth. Now, when you talk about Errol Spence and his pay-per-view numbers, these channels basically try to inflate the numbers because they're basically Errol Spence fanboys, most of them, okay, and they try to make it look good. They try to make the number, they massage the numbers basically. I mean, for example, you will hear a number come out that says, say for example, Errol Spencer did 300,000 pay-per-views. When you listen to these Ldbc channels, that 300,000 pay-per-view turn into 400,000. Okay, and I've seen that done many times, especially with people like Phantom Boxing, and Blue Blood Sports. They always inflate those numbers, and the numbers are inflated when they're reported anyway. Okay, so the numbers are already inflated. So for example, if say Mike Carpenter will come out with a number, he's the one that's the source of a lot of these pay-per-view numbers. Say for example, he'll come out with a number of say 250,000 pay-per-views, and in actuality, the number is probably under 200,000. I mean, when you look at other sources, okay, and so the numbers are already inflated when they come out, and then the Ldbc fanboys, they inflate the numbers even more. Okay, so it is what it is. Now, so we're gonna look at this whole Errol Spence pay-per-view numbers, and and talk about whether or not he's a pay-per-view star or not. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think he has done more than 350 pay-per-view buys at this point in his career. With 360,000, let's say, for example, because that's what was reported for the Mikey Garcia fight. Okay, now Mikey Garcia has a big Mexican following. Okay, and many people would say that that 360,000 number that we're talking about in terms of the Mikey Garcia Errol Spence fight was mostly because of Mikey Garcia. Okay, and even Spence himself had said that, you know, Mikey Garcia, you know, leading up to that fight, he had said Mikey Garcia has a big following, and he would like to get some of that, and that the fight between him and Mikey Garcia, you know, means that he will become a pay-per-view star because of, you know, Mikey Garcia and his following. Okay, he actually said that in a you know, in a pre-fight interview leading up to that Mikey Garcia fight. So the fact that people are saying that Spence himself is a pay-per-view star doesn't really you know, jive with reality. Okay, in order for Spence to be a pay-per-view star, he would have to have done better numbers in his fights, you know, that wasn't with Mikey Garcia than, you know, the one that he actually did with Mikey Garcia. Like I said, the reported numbers for that fight was 360,000 pay-per-view. Okay, and you know, we know that Mikey Garcia was responsible for a large number of those pay-per-views. Okay, and so, you know, to say that Spence is a pay-per-view star is really a stretch, really. Okay, at this point, because again, 350,000 pay-per-views is not really a very good number in terms of pay-per-view. I mean, you know, we're talking about, when we talk about pay-per-view stars, we're talking about, you know, 1 million plus pay-per-view. Okay, like, you know, the penultimate pay-per-view star, as far as we know at this point, you know, was Mayweather. I mean, Mayweather did like 4.5 million pay-per-views in his fight with Conor McGregor, I believe. Okay, and he also did 4 million plus, 4 million plus, you know, with Manny Pacquiao. Okay, and you know, he did other pay-per-views, you know, with you know, other fighters where he made 2 million pay-per-views, 3 million, 1 million plus. So he did, you know, all of Mayweather's pay-per-view was more than 1 million or more than 2 million. So that's what you call a pay-per-view star. When we're talking about 350,000, 360,000 pay-per-views, that's as far from a pay-per-view star as you can get. You know, and at the end of the day, you know, for active boxer, who's supposed to be the cash cow of the PBC, you know, 360,000 pay-per-views is not really that much. I mean, it's okay numbers, but it's not, you know, I wouldn't consider that to be a pay-per-view star, and neither would the networks. Okay, now as an example of what I'm talking about here, with the Danny Garcia Errol Spence fight, the networks, okay, expected that fight to do 700 pay-per-view, 600 to 700 pay-per-view buys, but the fight did a reported 250,000 pay-per-view. Okay, let's take a look at that. There it is, right? So here it is, payouts. Here at the bottom here, it says that this pay-per-view is expected to do around 600 to 750 pay-per-view buys. Okay, which will ensure both Danny Garcia and Errol Spence clear around $8 to $10 million. Now, that's what it was expected to do. 607. That's what the networks expected. The Fox, they expected that, you know, PBC, you know, she says here PBC and Fox will make their percentage of final pay-per-view revenue. So here, Fox and, you know, PBC was expecting this fight to do 600 to 700 pay-per-views, and as we all know, it was reported that the fight did, you know, a lot less than that. So this whole, you know, there it is right here. Danny Garcia generates in excess of 250,000 pay-per-views. So we see that the fight did a reported 250,000 pay-per-views, and it was expected to do 600 to 700,000. So that's a big difference. You know, that's less than half of what he was expected to do. Okay, and many people, I mean, there are rumors out there that this whole 250,000 number is inflated. Okay, we're hearing that, you know, rumors that it actually did less than that. Okay, less than 200,000. Okay, but you know, we can go with the 250,000. You know, but still, even if we're going with the 250,000 pay-per-view number, it's a lot less than 600 to 700,000. So we see that this whole idea that Errol Spence is a pay-per-view star, so to speak, it's not really based on any reality, because let's take a look at some of the pay-per-view numbers that he has so far. And we'll see that here, this is the Spence Garcia, which they're talking about Mikey Garcia, not Danny. This is the Mikey Garcia pay-per-view fight, and look, there it is, okay? It was reported again that it did 360,000 pay-per-view buys. Again, I caution people to know that some of these numbers are basically inflated, but let's just go with the 260,000 number, okay? So that was the Spence Mikey Garcia fight, 360,000 pay-per-views. And as I noted, Mikey Garcia was responsible for a lot of that number. Now, this fight, generated that amount of buys. Let's look at the next fight that Spence had in pay-per-view. Spence versus Porter generates over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. So there it is. We see that there's a drop already. If we're to go by these numbers, and again, I want to caution people that these numbers are probably inflated in the first place. Okay, and so it probably didn't even do 200,000 pay-per-view buys, but we're gonna go with 300,000. Okay, but again, as you can see, the difference between the second pay-per-view fight and the first one, 360,000 with Mikey Garcia to 300,000 with Porter, and then if we go to Danny Garcia, it's 250,000. Okay, so as we see, Spence pay-per-view numbers has consistently been going down. Okay, after each fight, based on the opponents he's been fighting, because at the end of the day, what we saw is that what we are seeing with Spence is that he fought Mikey Garcia, which was a lightweight, really, moving up to welterweight, and I don't think the networks was happy with that fight, really, per se. At the end of the day, I don't think anybody really demanded that fight. Nobody was, it wasn't like people were saying, we want to see the fight between Mikey Garcia and Spence. I mean, that wasn't a fight that fans or the networks or anybody was demanding, okay? And so, it didn't do very well. I mean, it did good because of Mikey Garcia, because, again, he has a good Mexican fan base, and they're going to show up all the time for Mikey Garcia. So, and this Spence Porter fight, again, although this was a unification bout, and this was a unification fight, and it did even less than the Mikey Garcia fight, okay? Which just goes to show you that Mikey Garcia has a good fan base, because he was able to pull 360,000 pay-per-view buys. But here we have supposedly a big unification bout between Porter and Errol Spence, and we see it did even less, okay? So even with this, fight, we are seeing that the numbers are going down. It's trending downwards. Again, this wasn't necessarily a fight that people were demanding, okay? And, the numbers basically showcase that, all right? So, again, Errol Spence beat Porter, but Porter, even though he was a champion, he had lost already. He had lost to Kell Brook, who Errol Spence defeated to become the IBF champion. So basically what we are seeing is that Errol Spence beat Kell Brook, and then he went and fought the guy that Kell Brook defeated. He didn't go and fight, somebody else. He basically moving backwards in terms of opponents, because, again, I mean, we understand that Porter had the belt, and so it's a unification bout. So we can say, okay, it's a unification. But again, the reality is that he fought Kell Brook, and then he went and fought the guy that Kell Brook beat. Okay, and so we moved to the Danny Garcia fight, and again, we see that this wasn't a fight that people were demanding. Really, nobody really was demanding that fight, and so the numbers again is showing you that. And at the end of the day, Danny Garcia lost to Porter. So Errol Spence beat Porter, and then he went and fought the guy that Porter beat. Okay? So, it is what it is. So again, I just, when we look at these so-called we look at these numbers in the pay-per-view again for Errol Spence. We see that his numbers is going down, and it doesn't really match up with the idea that he's some kind of pay-per-view star. Okay, I mean it's just as far from reality as we can get. It's just not reality. It's just another. As we see that we're looking at these numbers and we see that this whole idea that Errol Spence is a pay-per-view star is just a narrative, and it's been run by the PBC. In reality, the networks are not very happy with Errol Spence. Okay, and as we know, there's rumors that Fox Network is getting ready to part ways with PBC because they're not getting the fights that they want to get. They're not getting the viewership that they want to get. They're not getting the numbers that they would like to see. Okay, and as as I showed you, they were expecting 600 to 700 pay-per-view buys with the Danny Garcia fight. The whole thing about the return of Errol Spence and it's coming back from the injury and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, the fight only did 250,000 pay-per-view buys, if that much. And the networks were very disappointed, to say the least. Okay, so basically we're hearing rumors that there might be a parting of ways between the networks and PBC, and the big reason for that is that they feel that they're not getting enough 50-50 fights. And I just did a video on that, so go and look at that video. It's the last video I posted before this one. And they're basically not happy, and they're not getting the fight they want to see. For example, they want a lot of these networks, the networks or the suits, they want the Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford fight because they believe that fight is going to be a big bonanza for them in terms of viewership. And we all know Errol Spence doesn't want that fight. And we heard Bob Arum come out and said that PBC wants to fight, the network wants to fight, but the only person that doesn't want that fight is Errol Spence. So and then we saw that Terence Crawford came out and said that he's not even going to ask for that fight anymore. He's been trying to get that fight for 3 years, and Errol Spence has been consistently making excuses as to why he don't want to fight him. And this whole 60-40 thing was the latest. And so after that, we saw that Errol Spence came out and said the suits wanted him to fight and shut up, and wanted to take a pay cut. And why don't they take a pay cut? And again, that was in reference to the fact that the networks, PBC, and wanted him to go ahead and take that fight with Terence Crawford, and just go ahead and take the 50-50 split, and and make the fight. And he's saying he's not going to do that, and he doesn't want to do that. And so that's what that was all about, with all this suit telling him to just fight and shut up. Okay, and that's what he was talking about in terms of pay cut. The 60-40, he wants 60-40. But again, it's just another excuse not to fight Terence Crawford at the end of the day. And that's it is what it is. So yeah, this whole idea that Spence is a pay-per-view star again is just not based on any reality whatsoever. It's just another Ldbc narrative being run by these Errol Spence fanboys out there at the Ldbc, and it doesn't really jibe with the reality of what the networks are seeing in terms of the numbers. And as here again, we are seeing, the Danny Garcia fight, they expected 750,000, and they only got 250,000, if that much. We're hearing rumors that it was actually under 200,000 pay-per-view buys for that fight. So it is what it is. So again, people, I just want to bring that out. We want to separate myth from reality. And the reality is that Errol Spence is not really a pay-per-view star at all. It's just a narrative it's just hype. And, this talk of him being a pay-per-view star, again, is just another foolish narrative being run by the Ldbc and, Spence fan base within that small group of guys called Ldbc. Because, again, when you talk to the networks, they're not happy with Spence's numbers at all. So that's what it is. Not much more to say about that. We saw the numbers for yourself. I just show you the numbers. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna bring you the facts. This is TBE Boxing. That's all I have for right now. I'm out.